Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
And today's guest is Michael Shackleford. Shack was a co-host of this podcast for more than a year. Came back and visited a number of times, including some Super Bowl prop bets. Some went better than others. And so Shack is a part of the history of Gambling with an Edge and deserves a chance to say goodbye to our audience for the last time. So, Michael Shackleford, welcome back to Gambling with an Edge.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm honored to be the guest on one of your last shows. And
we actually don't know how last it's going to be. When we taped the show yesterday, we thought this was going to be the penultimate show, and so Richard and I were going to have a mailbag show for afterwards. And then overnight I was going, Richard, it would be pretty cool if I interviewed you and you interviewed me for another last show. So the one you hear next week is going to say it's the last show, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's one after that. So, but who knows? We thank our audience. All right. So the immediate impetus for the interview with Shack is a new version of Gambling 102. So this is like the 14th version of that, and it keeps coming out, keeps changing a little bit. So why is it still Gambling 102 version 3, version 4,
yes,
rather than
Go ahead.
another name?
This is the third printing of the book. Every time there's a new printing, I update it a little bit. I add some new games, take out some dead games. And with this third edition, the main new material is going to be on slot machines, especially vulturable or accumulator slots. And I talk about some particular games and how to tell if it's in a state with a player advantage.
And when is the book due out?
I wish I knew. I turned it in December of 2022. So I've been waiting 4 months, and in my experience with Huntington Press, it's out when it's out. And so I really hate to give out a time frame.
Yeah, we all have experience with that.
Okay. So you list 8 beatable slot machines.
9, actually.
9, actually. All right. So one of them is Cashman Bingo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are at least 2 versions of Cashman Bingo. So do you treat them the same?
What is the difference between the 2 versions?
Oh, in the older version, when you look down at the panel, it will show you how it will have a dot on each bingo square that is full. Mm-hmm. So you can look out and see if there are, if it's 3 or 4, it's almost never a play. And if there's like 20, it's always a play. And so you can kind of glance to see if there's a lot of them, in which case you want to look at it further. In the newer version, you actually have to put a ticket or money into the machine and then scroll from screen to screen to screen to see what the current state of the game is.
So the advice that I give in my book and my website applies to both games. It's my understanding that it's just a presentation difference, but the math of the game is basically the same. And I welcome correction on that if I'm wrong.
I treat them the same. In figuring out these games,
mm-hmm.
were you able to have par sheets from the manufacturer, or a personal experience of go out and count cycles, or you have a number of friends on your Wizard of Vegas site, among other places, who do this, and maybe you got some information from them?
It's mostly the latter. It is friends that do vulture slots that give me advice, and I kind of take an amalgamation of all their opinions, and most of them, in fact all of them, wish to remain nameless. However, with Cashman Bingo, That was the first one I got really serious about, and I videoed myself playing, and I did a lot of analysis, and I dug pretty deeply into that one. And I created my own strategy that other people say sounded reasonable. But with the rest of the games, I got kind of lazy, and I played them a little bit just to make sure the advice I was getting seemed reasonable. But it's mostly other sources that helped me out.
Are you out there? Are you out there playing the games, not just for research, but to make money? Do you actually play?
Not very much. Yesterday, I was talking about this topic with a friend at the Suncoast, and I happened, again, coming back to Cashman Bingo, I saw a game that was cased in like 5 different places. So, of course, I jumped in and played that. But I only, if I'm in a casino for another reason, I will look at the machines and try to find a play, but I never go to a casino specifically for this topic. And I live in Las Vegas, and everyone seems to sing the blues that it's tough to find good games in Vegas because there's just so much competition from other vultures.
That's true. There are a lot of other players. But for those of you who are interested in, the book includes a strategy for Cashman Bingo, Rich Little Piggies, Scarab, Golden Juggle Grand, Hexbreaker 3, Magic of the Nile, Ocean Magic, Golden Egypt, Regal Riches, which is also called Prosperity Pearl.
Thank you.
So if you want to learn a reasonable strategy for these games, give you a head start to see if Advantage Slots is right for you. The new version of Gambling 102 is a good source. And you
will be when it comes out, which we don't know when that will be.
Well, you bug Anthony Curtis on that. And so, sorry, Anthony, there's your goodbye shot. So actually, Anthony sometimes doesn't know. He sent it off to the printer X number of weeks ago, and he was thinking it was going to be back. They were hold up. It's beyond his control, and I don't know what the situation is, but it's coming. All right, now, in addition to those kind of slots, there are also some must-hit buys, which is a type of advantage slot machine where there are numbers. So, example, if it's must-hit by 500, it might start at 250 and go up, and then when it gets to be a certain level, it's positive expectation to play it until it gets to 2,000 or gets to 500. So you give strategy on when to get on must-hit buys. So some of these are completely random, and some of these are weighted random. So what do you have to say about that, Michael?
Yes, I wrote about this on my website a long time ago, and as you correctly described, there will be a meter, and it will say that we are just going to award this jackpot randomly, and a good example is between $250 and $500. So it starts at $250, and it grows by either a certain percentage of money bet or money won, and again, they guarantee that it will hit by 500 in this example. And the way most makers do this is it could be hit anywhere in that range with equal probability. However, some makers, especially AGS, always delay or almost always delay it until the very end of the range, which I frankly think is unethical because I think it's reasonable to assume that it could hit anywhere in the range with equal probability. So if you see a game at, say, 480, it would be tempting to play it, thinking it's just got $20 more to go. But if the game never hits until it gets to, say, 495, then I think that's a tease, and it's, again, I think it's unethical, and I don't think the Gaming Control Board should allow it. Unless it's stated in the rules somewhere that they do tend to delay hitting these jackpots until the end. Then I would be okay with it. But they do not disclose any such information in the rule screens.
Yeah, a whole series of those machines have the word deluxe on the end, like Money Storm Deluxe or Coyote Deluxe, where it almost always waits until it's a dollar or two before the end, before it hits. And so, but it does happen. And even when it is that way, it can be good to get on it at a particular number, because the amount of money that you are putting in is going to be less than the amount of money that you're taking out on average. So learning when these numbers are is part of the game, and takes a lot of data.
But also, isn't that going to change in different casinos? They may be holding a different amount. They may have the machine set to hold more or less than the number you're familiar with. And so what if you go to another state and, let's say that in Las Vegas, most places, you're going to get on at this number, but now you go over to, New Jersey, and maybe they're holding a lot more, so you would be losing money if you got on at the same number. How do you deal with that?
In my opinion, the way these machines are programmed is, yes, the manufacturer may allow different return percentages, but I think the mystery jackpot feature is the same from game to game for any given type of game. So I think the advice that works in Nevada would also work in Mississippi, for example.
Well, wait a minute. When you calculate that your number for getting on, let's say you decide, I'm just going to pick a number out of my ass here, that this 500 you should get on at 480, and that's based on the idea that the machine is holding, let's say, 10%, and you're going to lose X amount before the jackpot hits. But if you go to another state and that machine is holding 15%, you're going to lose a lot more before the jackpot hits, and you may no longer be playing with an edge.
That's a good point. And on my website, I indicate a formula for when the meter is high enough that you should play. And this formula does depend upon the return of the game. And so if you were playing in a more generous casino, it would have a different entry point than a stingy one. But I think that a 90% return is, shall we say, fair to assume as a general average. And but by the way, it's not that the mechanism that determines the mystery jackpot is different from casino to casino, but it's the expense of playing the game, waiting for that jackpot to hit.
Right.
So you should have a high entry point at a stingier casino because you're going to lose more money along the way.
Right, but how do you know? You can kind of know in Las Vegas, for example, that the Strip is way stingier than the locals joints. But when you go to a new state, if you go to Iowa and you've never been there, you don't really have a clue.
My advice there is the greater the competition in the local market, the looser the games are probably going to be, and the nicer the casino, the stingier the slots. Just some general advice to go on, and yes, I'm sure there are many exceptions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's talk about the difference between, like, video poker and slots are both in the slot department, but they're very, very, very different games. Now, I have some ideas on this, but have you played them both enough to be able to speak how video poker and slots are different?
Sure, I can speak to that topic. I played a lot more video poker than video slots, but discuss it.
So go ahead. So how are they different?
Video poker is very mathematical. It's quantifiable. They tell you what the rules are, so it could be analyzed to death, as I have done, including, very complicated strategies. If you want to really, really get close to the maximum optimal strategy return. And video poker tends to have a very thin advantage, as you know. So this is the type of thing that if you're a video poker player, you're probably going to be putting in a lot of hours at the machine. Whereas slots is something kind of like hunting. You have to hunt around the casino, probably looking at 100 games to find one or two good ones. And when you find them, you're probably going to, in most cases, just play for a short time until that bonus hits. And then off you go looking for the next game. So it's a totally different experience for the player.
Sounds like online dating.
I like that.
Well, except hopefully in online dating, you're not done in a minute and a half after you start. But I suppose some people are.
90 seconds is good for me.
All right. Yeah, the other differences is on video poker, you largely can know what you're going to be playing when you get to the casino. Mm-hmm. Unless you're specializing in progressives and you haven't scouted it recently, you know that they have a particular double-double bonus game that returns such and such an amount, and you know what the slot club is, and you know what the promotion is. And so you can predict it. In slot machines, any individual slot machine could be an 85 or 120% game or more, depending on the level of various progressives or other features on the machine. And these vary by the player. So you usually so you don't know. It depends on how many people who don't know how to play the game have played since the jackpots hit. Another difference is in video poker on multi-games, and you know that it's, say, quarter, 50-cent dollar, and you know which 12 games are on this machine, and it's going to be the same 12 games every day. But in slot machines, there could easily be also 3 or 5 denominations, and can be 3 or 5 or 10, 3 or 5 different numbers of coins per bet. And so any of which could be positive because you don't know who left it in what condition. So you come up to a advantage slot machine, and sometimes you have to check 20 to 30 different conditions to know whether or not there's one or more plays on it. And that takes time. It's also very obvious what you're doing. Whereas in video poker, you know if if the This Is Wild game had the loosest pay schedule a week ago on this machine, well, it probably still does. Whereas in slot machine, you have to check. And
this,
you need to.
This is really analogous to counting cards versus playing whole cards or some other kind of advanced strategy at blackjack. And the rap that you hear from people who don't play these strategies is, oh, well, you can spend all your time scouting and never find anything, but if I'm counting, I can just walk in and sit down and play. So, yeah, it's very much the same thing, that when you're playing more advanced forms of blackjack or other table games, yes, a lot of it is the scouting, and you never know what you're going to find. But when you do find it, it's worth way more than that video poker game that you could have just walked in and sat down and started playing.
Yeah, to that, I would add that video poker is extremely quantifiable, and the math is known, and the strategies are known, whereas everything with slot machines is no one's exactly sure. Like, you can bring up any of these games that can have a player advantage, and no two people will probably agree on exactly when to play. These strategies are mostly based on personal experience. And so it's a new advantage play, and that's why I think that how shall I put it, that there's not that much known about it, and you have to get information generally through other players. And in my book, I do touch on 9 of them, but there's a lot more than 9 out there. And I would also like to go back to something that Bob said, is that about the range. I believe you said 85% to 120%. So I totally agree that a game can have a 20% player advantage if it's in a good state, but it can also be way lower than 85% if it's in a horrible state. It might get as low as, say, 50%. So for that reason, if someone is a recreational slot player and has no interest in learning about when to play, I would say don't play an accumulator slot at all, because most of them are left at a very low state. And you will probably, when you start to play, you'll be playing into a very bad state, most likely. So if you are a slot player, and I can't talk you out of playing slots, I would say avoid accumulator slots and just play something where the odds are the same every single spin.
All right. Let's go on to other things in your book. What else is new in your Gambling 102 version 3?
So I do have new chapters on Crapless craps and face-up Pai Gow poker. Previously in the second edition, those games were touched on briefly, but because they've become much more popular, I dig into them a little bit deeper.
Okay.
I mean, well, with face-up Pai Gow poker, I can see that, but Crapless craps? I mean, how deep can you dig? I mean, what's new there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that previously I went into such things as the odds on place bets on the 2, 3, 11, and 12. But yeah, again, there's not that much to say about Crapless craps. But I would like to say just real briefly that the odds are better in conventional craps than Crapless craps.
And I can't imagine that you thoroughly cover face-up Pai Gow poker, because that could take a whole book in and of itself, couldn't it?
Well, it's easy to play because it's obvious how to set your cards. And I've run simulations on the game, so I think that I do cover everything that really needs to be said about it.
Huh. Well, I guess the dealer has a fixed strategy, right? And as long as you know that, then yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it would be obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, you don't even need to know the house way, because the dealer will sit there and arrange their hand, so you know exactly what you're facing against.
Oh, they arrange theirs before you do. So, oh yeah, okay.
Thus the name of the game, face up.
Yeah.
Okay. You've also been working on Ultimate X bonus streak. Is this in your book or on your website, or what's the status of it?
Yep, this is very fresh on my website. I started discussing it in my forum about a month ago, but I finally put together a page on my website on vulturing Ultimate X bonus streak, so I'm pretty proud of that. It was not an easy thing to analyze.
Okay, in the past on bonus streak, you can look at the screen and count up the number of multipliers. And if it's more than the game calls for, then you have an advantage. So if it's a 10-play game, so you're playing 10 coins a line, if the multiplier is at least 20, then it's a positive play for at least one hand. Now, that was so that you could get one or two hands out of that. It didn't yield many long-term plays. And so, although it could, so it was largely a one-and-done situation, and so I stopped looking at that. So, on your strategy, how often do you get plays?
So, my strategy looks more than just one hand in the future. You're absolutely right that let's look at 10-play double-double bonus, for example, with the 8-5 pay table. If you have 21 or more multipliers on the very next hand, it's obvious that you should play it. However, if you look at the next two hands, if you have 34 or more, then my strategy says to play. And if you look at the next three hands and you see 43 or more multipliers, then you should play. And the reason that you should play with numbers that are less than, say, 40 and 60 respectively is because these multipliers have a chance to grow, and you may get multipliers on hands that had only a 1x multiplier right now. So it's the multipliers you can either earn new ones or old ones can grow up to a 12.
Now your strategy on this, so you're talking about now the strategy when to jump in, which is an important part.
Mm-hmm.
But in regular Ultimate X vulturing,
Mm-hmm.
you're betting 5 coins, which is a half bet, and so you play basic strategy for that pay table, having nothing to do with Ultimate X strategy. But on bonus streak, since you still are earning bonuses, and so your strategy needs to be somewhat bonus based rather than just game based. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree that for the long-term player, you follow a much different strategy than conventional video poker. However, for the vulture, they're not sitting there and playing it for a long period of time. They want to hit those immediate wins and then leave once the game doesn't have enough multipliers anymore. So under that hit and run strategy, I think that the correct strategy is very similar to conventional video poker, because you don't really care that much about earning future multipliers. You want to get the ones that are there right now and cut and run.
All right. One other thing I want to mention with Shaq that and the idea of it's all your fault. Bonnie reminded me last night when Bonnie and I are just about to celebrate our 9th anniversary. And approximately 9.5 years ago, we were taping a show, and so Bonnie came to see what taping the show was all about. This is when it was actually a radio podcast. So it was in a studio, and Michael was the host at that time. So apparently one time when I went to the restroom while Bonnie and Shaq were in the studio before the taping, he said, if you hook up with Bob, you're going to go on a lot of cruises. And so Bonnie remembered that, and she told me, she says she thinks she's been on 24 cruises in the last 9 years. And she didn't believe it was true when Shaq told her that, but she wanted to so I don't know how much that affected Bonnie's decision to finally say yes, but it's so if Shaq actually had anything to do with her saying yes, then I owe him big time, because my life is working very well being hooked up with Bonnie. So with all of that, so it's all your fault, Mike. With all that, let's do some commercials, and then we have some more questions for Mike.
Tales from the Felt is a new card counting and advantage play coffee table book that takes you inside the grind. It's 21 stories told by 21 different APs. Adventure, intrigue, and loneliness on the path to beating casinos for millions. Beautifully illustrated and bound, this collector's edition book features Hall of Famers and emerging heroes of the game. Proceeds go to help those affected by problem gambling. Learn more at store.blackjackapprenticeship.com, or you will find a link in the show notes.
Videopoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on most of the game. The game of the week is double super times pay, which requires 7 coins per line to play. You receive a 1 in 15 chance to get a 2x through 10x multiplier on the deal, and a second independent 1 in 15 chance of getting a 2x, a 10x multiplier on the draw. If you receive 2 multipliers, say 3x and 4x, they are added together into 7x, not multiplied into 12x. If you get a dealt royal flush, with 1 chance in 650,000 round numbers, there's still a 1 in 15 chance to get a multiplier. But if you do, it's always 20x combined for the deal and the draw. The return on the game is approximately 0.5% more on the base game, and no strategy deviations are required to play this game. But it doesn't play like it's a 0.5% more. So much of the return is on this dealt royal flush 20x multiplier that the basic if you round off 1 in 650,000 times 1 in 15 to be it never happens, and that takes a big chunk out of it, and so it's going to feel a lot tighter than 0.5% looser than the base game, but you could have that life-changing experience.
Everyone seems to be talking about sports betting lately. If you're looking to learn more about how you can profit from the sports betting gold rush, then unabated.com is a great resource for you. Founded by frequent Gambling with an Edge guests, Captain Jack and Rufus Peabody, Unabated has free educational articles and an odds screen to help you shop lines. If you bet props, their Essentials tier has projections and simulators you won't find elsewhere. Premium tier membership adds an array of pricing calculators, in-game tools, and the most advanced real-time odds screen available. Take a trial run with their tools to decide if unabated.com is right for you.
All right. So you have been, Michael Shackleford, the Wizard of Odds for a sizable number of years. How long do you plan to stay Wizard of Odds?
Thanks for the question. I am almost 58 as we do this interview, and I'm thinking about hanging up the wizard hat when I turn 60 in May of 2025, and I'm already gradually entering into retirement as I cut back on my wizard duties and private consulting. However, that may need to be changed if there's, say, a big downturn in the economy.
So do you expect the Wizard of Odds website and all the information on there to last there indefinitely and not being updated, but if somebody wants to use one of your tools or information, it will stay there after you're no longer the wizard, or is that going to disappear too?
So, as most people know, I sold the site in 2014, and it is owned by my boss, and I'm sure that he is going to keep it around. It makes, as far as I know, a lot of money, and I'm sure that he wants to keep that going. It may be that somebody else takes over, shall we say, the role as the wizard. That I don't know. That's up to him. But I'm absolutely sure that the site will remain there.
Do you have a wizard hat or cape or wand that you are going to turn over to whoever is next in line?
In a figurative way of speaking, absolutely. I would like to see somebody who I respect fill my shoes, and I would absolutely welcome a transition period where I mentor this person. Still don't know what the future holds with that. But I would very much like to see the site still have the same standards that it has now.
Actually, I know somebody who might be an appropriate wizard. I will talk to him, and if somebody he might be a good wizard. I'm not sure. I don't know how if he looks good in black, but we'll have to find out. So when you fade into retirement, do you have plans? I mean, are you going to travel the world? Are you
just going to go out and play slot machines?
No, I really am itchy to travel the world, especially doing adventurous things. Like I'd like to hike, climb lots of mountains, bicycle all over the country and the world, and river rafting, kayaking. I really have a long list of ideas of things that I'd like to do, and I'd like to do as many as possible before I get too old to do them.
Yeah. Some people would say 60 is already too old, but what do they know?
You chase eclipses, Mike, right? You're going to Waco for the eclipse. Are you going to start chasing tornadoes as well?
I never thought about the tornadoes. I would actually like to see a tornado once in my life. You don't see very many here in Las Vegas, but I love total eclipses. And for those who don't know, there's going to be a total eclipse of the sun running through Mexico, cutting into Texas, and then going northeast up to Maine and then into Canada. And April 8th, 2024 is the date. And I already booked an Airbnb as well as some hotel rooms in Waco, Texas. Why Waco exactly? Because the totality path goes right over Waco. So they're going to get, I believe, 4 minutes and 15 seconds of totality, which is almost as much as you can get anywhere. And other big cities that are going to be in the totality path are Austin, Dallas, I believe Indianapolis, and Cleveland and Buffalo, but they may not necessarily be right in the middle of the path like Waco is. So there's a very lively discussion about the eclipse in my forum at Wizard of Vegas, but I highly recommend anybody who can see it to see it and plan in advance, because the hotel rooms have already booked up along the path. Traffic can be terrible on the day of the eclipse, so try to be someplace, try to stay someplace that's already in the path if you can.
Yeah, if you're comparing Waco and Buffalo, Waco is more likely to be sunny and clear than Buffalo is.
Yeah, I forgot to say that.
And although you could charter an airplane and be above the clouds, so the weather wouldn't matter for the most part, but that's a more expensive option than most people are probably interested in enduring. We spoke earlier about face-up Pai Gow poker. So there was a big jackpot, got over $6 million not so long ago. Did you analyze that at the time, or how did that go?
Oh, absolutely. There was a very lively discussion about that on my website, and I gave updates about the jackpot all the time. And it hit at 6.4 million, and it was a big player advantage at the time that it got hit. In fact, I think it was about $100 an hour play, even assuming a $25 or a $50 required base bet. And even if you assumed paying, say, 37% taxes on the jackpot, it was still, mathematically speaking, a very strong play. But if you didn't hit the jackpot, you'd probably be losing about $100 an hour chasing after it. So it was a very high volatility play that was not right for everybody. I did play it a little bit, but I didn't feel it was worth it for me to give up other things to play it.
Yeah. On a game like that, people learn the difference between the mean and the median.
Yep.
All right. Did you have any, you were a host for over a year. Do you have any specific memories of Gambling with an Edge that your favorite memories?
I think the most memorable show for me was when we had Cocktail Doll, whose real name is Dolly Wong, as our guest. And she was, I wanted to do shows when I was a co-host that weren't necessarily about becoming a better gambler, but more about the culture of Las Vegas and getting to know some regular jobs and, the pros and cons of these different occupations. So I was friends with a cocktail waitress at the New York, and she already had a website and a blog about her profession, and I just found her fascinating, and I loved her articles and her stuff. So we had her as a guest, and Bob, I'll let you talk about that experience. But it was a very fun show.
It was interesting. I'm not suggesting anything happened, but Michael enjoyed her and was. And if he could have talked her into going out and having a drink and chatting for a little bit afterwards, he would have been amenable to that. And she comes in with a new boyfriend, and neither one of them could keep their hands off of the other during the taping of the show. And so her hormones were just going crazy. And so I suspect that part was disappointing to Shaq, because she was obviously going to be busy after the show, had no time for a drink with him that day, whether they had another one some other time or not. But that was kind of interesting to watch our guest on the show basically we're ready to tell them, get a room.
That just seems so weird that they would be doing that in the studio while she's talking on the air. That's just bizarre to me.
Yeah, and back then we had a producer because it was a radio show. His name was Leonard, if I remember right. And he was not happy with some of the language that Dolly was using.
Oh, he probably had to be That was AM radio, so he had to be bleeping it.
Yeah. And may I quote one of the things that I'm sure he did bleep?
Sure.
By all means.
Okay, so I don't remember the exact wordage, but Dolly said something to the effect of, I'm a very successful cocktail waitress. And I think I said something like, why do you think you may do better than other ones? And she said something like, I think it's because I'm hot and have big tits.
I think you can say that on the radio nowadays, but yeah, it's things have changed. Now, is she still writing, or do you know? Or
no, she is. I don't think she's very active at it anymore. Sad to say.
Do you know if she's still a cocktail waitress?
I think she is. I do follow her Facebook account, and she very rarely posts to it, but once in a while she does, and she's still there at the New York, and is still looking good, and she seems to not age at all.
Yeah, that was I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, 10 years ago, something in that range, and
you can find the episode at gamblingwithanedge.com. They're all there, so.
All right, one of my favorite shows that we haven't really talked about, and this one Shaq wasn't there, was Kelly's son, and along with Lori Chang as an interpreter, talking about Kelly's son was with Phil Ivey in Borgata and Crawford on the hole carding, and it was a delight.
The edge sorting, not hole carding.
Edge sorting.
Yeah.
Edge sorting. And so there was that was really interesting. I do remember I guess what I remember was one of my one-liners. I live for one-liners that I do, and often my one-liners don't land as well as they're supposed to. They sound really good in my head, and then when I say them, I go, oh dear, I didn't really mean to say that. But on this one, she was saying why she likes baccarat, and the idea was you can get really big bets down, because like in blackjack, she said they rarely ever let you bet more than 25,000 a hand. And so my comment was, only 25,000, man, you can't make any money that way. And so I was proud of that line, such as it was, but each of us live for different things. Do you have a favorite show that you liked, Richard?
Well, that was definitely a really good show. My favorite shows are the ones with the Vegas old timers. So, like the Mike Sexton show, I love these old stories about Vegas back in the day and the crazy betting so the Mike Sexton show was one, 2 shows with Billy Baxter. Yeah, those are my favorites. Those guys from way back telling stories about what it was like. Dewey Tomko, was another one. Yeah.
And then when you get Stanford Wong or Ed Thorpe, as these are legends in our industry, it's like, feel like, wow, that's pretty cool. Another one I liked was during the Jeopardy, right after James Holzhauer had his multi-million-dollar run. He came on the show and said he had a choice between coming onto our show. He was also invited to go to Good Morning America and be on that show, and he chose Gambling with an Edge, in which case I lived off of that comment for months. I thought that was pretty cool. So, Michael Shackleford, do you have any final words or thoughts to our listeners about your involvement with the show?
Thank you for asking. I believe that between being a co-host for a while and lots of appearances on the show, I think I've been on about 80. And I'm very proud to have been a part of this show. I think it's a great show. There's nothing else, in my opinion, that compares to it. So thank you very much for having me for every single show.
Well, thank you.
And thank you. And each co-host is different. And so each one adds something that the other ones don't. And so I learned from both of you two and the guests that you selected. And thank you both, and Frank Nealon.
Oh, you know what? While we're thanking people, I just want to say I want to thank. I guess I don't want to. Well, so first of all, I want to thank a guy we will call Nick, who designed our logo about 10 years ago. We went through 2 or 3 or 4 different logos, and he designed the one that finally stuck. And out of the blue, a couple of years ago, he emailed me a sharper one. He was saying, you know, it was looking kind of shoddy. I guess maybe the technology was a little better, so he sent me a crisper one. So we want to thank him. I want to thank the person, and I didn't realize I was going to do this until just now, so I didn't look up his name, but the guy who did the current opening music for the show, who is an avid listener. So I want to thank him. And most importantly, I also want to thank Mr. Doppy, who has been doing our show notes for the last 5 years, which is a thankless job. And he has never missed an episode in that 5 years that he's been doing it. So I really want to thank all of them.
Yeah, and when we started out, we had a musical logo using money as a song, and the announcer over at KLAS, which was the AM station, whose voice is very low, and he's actually in a 50s rock band. It's just great the way he would say, "Welcome to Gambling with an Edge." But we had to use that. We had to close that after a while because we didn't have license to use that particular song. But I enjoyed the way he would say, "Welcome to Gambling." That was cool. All right. Thank you, Michael, for today. Thank you for your support over the years on the Gambling with an Edge. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.